Welcome back to the Chill Like a Mother podcast. We are here with Katrina this week, and we are going to look at motherhood through the lens of matrescence and help us make sense of our motherhood experience and why so many mothers are wanting to do things differently.
Hello, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So tell me, for those who don't know, matrescence might be a word that they've not heard before or have not heard in a conversation. I know it took years for that word to enter into my motherhood kind of consciousness. What does matrescence mean and why is it important?
Yeah, absolutely. Such a great question. And yes, I was 2 years into my own motherhood journey before I heard that word. But when I did, it was like light bulbs going off. So matrescence is the complete transformation and identity shift that a woman experiences as she enters and moves through motherhood. And whilst it was a term that was coined back in the 70s by an anthropologist called Donna Raphael, it seemed to get lost in the textbooks until it was revived about 10 to 15 years ago by some other scholars who were looking at what happens when women become mothers. And I just think that it has that power to really change the way that we talk about, the way that we value, and the way that we experience motherhood. Because the emphasis is that it's a transition. It's not a one-off event. We don't just have our babies and then all of a sudden we become a mother. Just like adolescence captures that transition that we go through when we leave childhood and enter adulthood. This is exactly what happens when we become mums. It's transition. It takes time. It comes with a lot of bumps in the road that are completely normal. And we change on every level. We change.
Yes, on every
Every
level,
level.
every level. Yes, I remember distinctly, some of the moments in my own motherhood where, you have this inner narrative. Nobody told me it would be this hard. Nobody told me I would be up against this. No one told me that my previous whatever trauma from whatever age was going to resurface and the our brain changes and our hormones fluctuate and our changes in our body, or the way that we view our body, the like the identity shift. For me, I had a hospital birth and I was induced, so it was planned, so to speak.
Mm.
Um, and I went into the hospital at noon and left the hospital the next day, mom. Like
Yeah.
there was a time in my early postpartum where like I didn't even know who Kayla was or who she could be in and amongst all of those changes.
That is so true. And thank you so much for sharing your personal This is it. I think we spend so much time preparing for the birth.
Yes.
All of our pregnancies, we are focused on this one moment.
Yes.
And nobody tells us that, when we have our baby, they are not the only new person that we are going to meet that day. Because we're a newborn too. It's the first time that we are entering this world where we feel that we have been split in two because we
Mm.
have, it's the person that we were before and everything that we knew about ourselves and our world. And then the mum that we are becoming. And
Mhm.
I think it's really important to emphasize that, the becoming, because it is a journey.
Mhm.
And I think the support that we need, unfortunately, um, to help us through that journey often isn't there, because so much of the focus is on the child at that point in
Yes.
time. And of course, that is needed, and of course, that is necessary. But it's a little bit like, what about the mum? What
Yeah.
about the mum?
Yes. And what about the mom? Like For anyone who's kind of like hearing this term for the first time, or maybe like this is the first conversation you've kind of heard about this change, or maybe you're pregnant and you're like, I work with a lot of pregnant people, and there is this, I want to maybe call it a resistance to really understanding what happens after, right? Because our our society and the way that modern Instagram and all of the things are geared towards is just get to the birth, right? And then after that, you'll figure it out. And I even saw a couple of posts about a year ago that I was really having to reflect on about, like, stop telling mothers it gets worse. Like, there was kind of this like series of posts, and I can totally appreciate that doing therapy with pregnant people is that it does suck when people
Mm.
tell you it's going to get worse. But I think through the lens of matrescence, it changes that into it's not worse, maybe it's just different.
Yeah, you're so right. I think it just gives us a language to talk about motherhood that isn't in extremes, because I think at the
Yes.
moment, quite often, it's either motherhood is portrayed as blissful and it's this
Yes.
world of pastel shades and, natural and gorgeous children, just, looking beautiful and pristine. Or the other extreme is motherhood is so challenging.
Yeah.
It's the worst. It sucks. I hate my life. They tend to be the two different portrayals, or the kind of the mummy needs a wine culture.
Yes.
Motherhood is so awful, but we'll just drink through it, which I think is probably a lot of kind of the generation before us. That is kind of how they cope. But there's so much nuance in the middle. Like there's so much
Mhm.
space for more, and that is why having the language and kind of like a framework to understand that it's going to take time. You can piece it together. You need to take time to almost kind of unravel before you can
Mm.
then start to pick up the pieces and put them back together. And the answer is that you're never really going to be exactly, you and your life
Mhm.
are never going to be exactly the same way that they were. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be worse. It's just going to be different. And taking the time to process that, um, and feel like you actually have some agency in it as well. Because I think that's the other thing. A lot of
Mm.
time, the women that I work with or speak to, this sense of helplessness is that motherhood
Yes.
is happening to them.
To me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and yeah, and I think that's perpetuated as well, by society and by the expectations and the standards that we see, and therefore, if we don't match up to what we're seeing or what's being deemed as a good mum, then that's where we then start to feel like we're failing. When we're not, we're just finding our way.
Hmm. What would you define as some of those kind of like normal, and I use air quotes for those of you who are not watching the video part of this, like the normal parts of that transition that can feel sticky and hard, and um but that it is kind of normal, and that it does need to be processed or responded to in a way that feels like you have agency or feels like you have choice in it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think first of all, it's worth saying that matrescence is a universal experience, but we will all experience it very differently. And what is right for one mother isn't right for another, and
Yes.
some changes we will feel strongly, others we won't. So it is really unique, and I think knowing that is kind of the first step of actually feeling that you can take some control. Because if you constantly comparing to what everyone else is feeling or doing, then it's quite easy to feel that you're powerless if you're not matching up to that. But yeah, some typical things, kind of feeling that you've lost your old self, but you don't really know like who this new person is or where you're going. Quite often, kind of that happens as well when you kind of first come out of that early motherhood fog, and then you think, oh, hang on a minute, what about me? Who am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? So that's really common. Um, feeling invisible and less valued. A lot of women struggle with this kind of label of, oh, I'm just a mum now, whether they're having to take a pause in their careers, or just kind of, making changes to, their lifestyle. That can be a really big one. Um, Guilt, kind of feeling guilty for wanting time away from your children, wanting to maybe go back to work, and there's a lot of shame sometimes that comes with that of, oh my god, I love my child, I just need a bit of time for me. um Relationship changes, whether that's your relationship with your partner, or even with family. I experienced my relationship with my own mum. That was a real friction point. And kind of how we navigate that. Um, Feeling unexpected emotions that are not allowed, in air quotes, like
Yeah.
grief and anger and resentment, frustration. How dare I feel these things? As a mum, I'm meant to be happy and blissful and content and grateful. Um, so I think understanding that there is room for both,
Mm.
that that ambivalence is a normal part of matrescence. And it's something that I feel very strongly that kind of maternal ambivalence isn't spoken about enough.
Mm.
Because it's so normal, because it is a lot and you're just figuring it all out. And two things can be true at the same time.
That really struck a chord with me. And so if someone is listening right now and they've taken a big deep breath of like, okay, this is like these things are typical of the matrescence or the motherhood experience. What do they need to know to navigate through it? Who are the people they need to talk to? Or what are the things they need to be doing to process all of that?
So I think, first of all, just being aware that it's normal. First step, take a deep breath. You're not alone. It's not talked about enough, because what happens when we don't understand what's happening is that we don't talk about it. We put on a mask and we carry on as if we've got, everything together and everything is fine. Um, so I would say, you know, as uncomfortable as it feels, finding a space where you feel safe to be able to talk about some of the way that you're feeling, whether that is through professional channels or through friendships, families. Um, you know, I think back to my kind of early postpartum days and kind of going to like mum and baby groups. And we talked about everything apart from how we were feeling as mums. We would rather talk about poo than talk
Yes.
about the way that we were feeling. And I've always said, if I could go back and do one thing differently in that space, is I would pluck up the courage to try
Mm.
and talk about it. Um, so that's kind of one thing. I think the second is really approaching this with kindness and self-compassion. We are our own worst critic most of the time. And it's so easy for us to focus on the things where we feel that we are falling short, and not so easy to think of all the things that we're doing well. And something that I often encourage my clients to do is, along with a gratitude journal, who a lot of people now do, is in that same journal at the end of the day, just to write down three things that you feel proud of that day as a mom. And it could be the tiniest thing, you know. Um, Mine right now, so I've got a 4-year-old who really knows how to push my buttons. And so quite often mine is, I've just handled something where I didn't snap at her, so that they don't have to
Yes.
be good, but just reminding yourself that you're learning. This is a learning curve. And by the way, matrescence doesn't just end with that kind of that 6-week postpartum check. Um, it's ongoing, because in every new stage of motherhood, you are a new mum again.
Mhm.
you're a mum to a newborn, then you're a mum to a preschooler, then you're a new mum to a, someone that goes to school, then you're a new mum to a teenager. So that the cycle continues. So yeah, treating yourself with kindness, self-compassion, and questioning or
Mm.
interrogating kind of that inner mean mama voice that comes out so often. She loves to come out and shame us. Taking the time to just reflect as well on
Mhm.
on these changes. Sometimes they happen slowly and we don't notice, and then all of a sudden we look at ourselves in the mirror and think, "Who are you?" And that can kind of be a bit of a shock. So kind of trying to find small pockets of time to just, how am I feeling today? How am I feeling about X compared to how I did 2 weeks ago? And kind of taking regular check-ins with yourself as well can kind of help you see how you're growing, because it can be a time for huge, personal growth. Um, but it comes with its uncomfortable moments as well.
Yes, and to have so much grace and gentleness for yourself in those tough moments, because I think a lot of my clients, share with me that they want to avoid the tough moment. They want to try to do everything to prevent it, which creates this real, I must prepare for everything. I must
Mm,
sacrifice a lot of myself in order to, have the right dinner on the table so that we avoid the meltdown at supper time, so that we avoid the horrible bedtime, so that we avoid, there's this cycle of, I must give all of myself over to
mm,
this so that I can prevent any uncomfortable or tough moments, which can create so much pressure on, some of us who really struggle with things like perfectionism or emotional regulation, um, where in that you're trying so hard to prevent something from happening that when it does happen, you're so depleted. And then that's where the showing up, like you don't want to show up moments happen, right? Like yelling or slamming or, this like this feeling just comes out of you because it's not, it's been kind of lingering in the background and not totally paid attention to, which I have been in these moments. That's why I say it like that, right? There's been many moments in my own motherhood where I've gone through periods of not reflecting, not checking in, not feeling like I had agency, feeling like everything was happening to me and that I was just along for the ride. And then time has this funny way of passing by, and then you're faced with a moment. You're faced with this new moment where you don't show up the way that you want to. And then that mean voice then comes in and is you should have been doing this, you should have done that. Why did you do that?
yeah, I feel that resonates a lot with me, and I think also we come into motherhood with a lot of expectations for what the experience is going to be, but also what we're going to be like as mothers. And I think that's another big mindset shift. Actually, is actually taking the time to redefine what success looks like in motherhood. What are the expectations that are actually yours, and what expectations have you just kind of brought in, kind of with you from, whether that's from family, the way that you've seen it done, with the way that you were parented, or yeah, what you see in the media, social media. We come in carrying a lot of baggage already. When we don't reflect on that, and when we don't filter out what is truly ours based on our own values and what actually belongs to someone else, that can cause a lot of friction, as you say, because then we have more of those moments where we don't show up the way that we think we
We
should.
think. Mhm.
um it's a lot. It's not always easy to do this work as well. Working through things that actually were kind of completely unrelated to motherhood, from kind of earlier in
Yes.
my own childhood, or kind of my teens, and then all of a sudden they just start to show up in other ways with your children. So and I think that's why, yeah, going back to that, just being gentle, so gentle and compassionate towards ourselves, because we're doing a lot. It's a big job.
It is, and the stakes are high. Like, The learning curve is steep and the stakes are high because, how I mother now with an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old is very different than how I mothered with just a 2-year-old or
Yeah.
just a 6-month-old or a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, and a 6-month-old. It's different at every stage and every one of your children, if you have more than one, is also different and needs a different parenting lens or needs a different
Mm,
parenting approach because I say a lot to my new moms, like you're strangers, like you have known each other for 10 months in the womb, but in those early days, early months, that first year, like you're still getting to know each other
mm,
and you don't know what is going to comfort them, or in subsequent children what comforts one might not comfort another. And it is incredibly important to not take some of that personally. And I think some
mm,
of that is really connected to everything that you've said around expectations and the lens that we're viewing motherhood through, and how that changes through time. And just that you're getting to know not only each other, but you're getting to know this new version
mm.
of you, different
Yeah.
version.
Yeah, exactly. Learning things about yourself as well that you didn't know. And yeah, you're so right. I think the not take when we don't take the time to actually get to know each other, both, and I mean kind of both our child, but also kind of ourselves, is you can almost kind of like time kind of goes by and you just feel completely discombobulated because you think, well, how did I get here? Like it's and then obviously there's kind of that work to then kind of process like how you did get there. But it's wonderful and it's crazy and it's messy and it's just all of the things. So, I went into motherhood kind of thinking one thing and it's turning out to be 100 different other things. As I said, it can be, I think, the making of us. It breaks us, but it does put us back together as well.
Oh, yes. Yes, and I think that's a really powerful takeaway, that it will likely break you before it puts you back together again. When we resist the falling apart or the knowing how to put ourselves back together, or not knowing who or how or where we need to reach out for support in that process, can create some of that helplessness, that hopelessness. But when we have the language for it, we have the language of struggle, of not doing it alone, of voicing those moments of shame or moments of guilt. Those are the pieces that are being put back together when we kind of break that silence, and sometimes even the silence with ourselves. I think in social media, there's a lot of, talk about talking outside of yourself, getting professional support and how to do all of that. But I think also part of that process is breaking the silence inside.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the most difficult step because we don't want to admit to ourselves that we're struggling, that we're finding it hard. I think also, with the generation that's kind of been brought up being told that we can be and do and have everything. And so when we get everything that we want and then we struggle, then we think we're doing something wrong. So that's where the
Yeah.
self-blame comes in. And then that's what makes it so hard to speak out. Um, so I think, that's why I'm so passionate about normalizing, conversations like this is what will normalize um, the the bumps in the road that come with matrescence, and that this is totally normal, and that you're not alone, and likely every mother that you meet will be facing some kind of struggle or challenge, even if she looks like she has it all together, and that there are places that you can go and reach out for support, and kind of finding what works best for you. Some mums, they really want to be kind of held in circle. For other mums, it might be, going to therapy. Other mums might thrive more with coaching because they feel that they're, taking some actions themselves. So I think finding what support looks like for you as well is that's another big important step, because it won't look the same for every mum.
Thank you so much, Katrina, for being
Thank
here with
you.
us. I like to kind of do I don't know what I call it, kind of a rapid fire questions at the end, just
Okay. Yeah.
for some fun. What's on your bedside table?
My bedside table, I have a book called Motherhood, Feminism's Unfinished Business, which I only started reading yesterday, but I'm actually quite looking forward to bedtime tonight so that I can get back into it.
Awesome. What do you do for fun?
Oh, for fun. Well, if it's fun by myself, then I love just wandering around galleries in London, um, going to Borough Market, which is like this amazing kind of food market, and walking along the riverside. So that would be kind of like my ideal kind of me date. And if it's kind of fun with my family, then to be honest, at the moment my daughter's 4, so she just wants to be outdoors. So we've got some really lovely kind of parks close by. So winter or autumn, kind of changing with the seasons, running around, kicking the ball around, something like that.
What do you do for creativity or self-expression?
So creativity, I dabble a little bit in interior design, but obviously that doesn't kind of give me that much scope to kind of keep kind of going over things. But I do love interiors. Um, and self-expression normally through writing. So that's kind of my outlet. Yeah, I love my journals, my blogs and all that kind of stuff.
And where can people find you?
So people can come and find me either on Instagram. I'm at Katrina Court underscore coach. Or my website is katrinacourtcoaching.com. So yeah, they're probably the best ways to come and say hi.
Awesome. And I will include all those links in the notes below. Thank you so much, Katrina, for being here with us. And thank you all for listening and hanging out with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely to chat.
Thanks, Katrina. Bye.